I know what you're thinking. Ms. B, we already did this one. We already learned about the growth of the modern American city. We already answered about problems emerging at this time. But guess what? This is part 2. So you can continue on your last section of notes if you still have space. If you need to start a whole new page, feel free to do so. Either way, just make sure you get this information down. There is vocabulary for this today, so make sure you go to your vocabulary page. I know you have one. When I come back to school, you're not going to make me sad and see that you never made one all this time. Not when I'm doing all this work for free. No, you're going to do your part. You're going to write the definition of, it's true. Like, why am I spending all this time if you're not going to do it, right? Fraud. It's an intentional trick or lie used to illegally gain something of value, like money or property from another person. You probably hear the word fraud a lot, but if you don't know it, it's important that you do. So make sure you have this on your vocab sheet. All right. So here's a question we can first discuss. How bad was poverty and crime at the time? Well, relief or help, assistance was given to people who were considered completely incapable of supporting themselves. So people like orphans or widows or people with disabilities. Now, this doesn't even mean they necessarily got any assistance, but if there was assistance to be given, these are the people who received it. The view was that if you were able to go out and work, you did not need such assistance. We discussed last year, if you had any, about what it was like living in these tenements, and we discussed is he here to give assistance to orphans? Thank you, Georgie. Thank you. Oh, I thought Super Baby was going to help me. Oh, all right, let's get this video moving. All right. Jacob Reese, the photojournalist, Super Baby, the Giants actually won today, so he's feeling very super. In 1890, he took photos and put together a book of people living in poverty in the slums, and that was called How the Other Half Lives. This above was one such of those photos. Yes, very good job. Very good job, right, guys? Now, reformers, those are people who wanted change, right? And they were asking the government to do more help, right? That more people, you had these children living in slums in unhealthy and unsafe conditions. Government, can you find a way to help us? Murder was going up. So if you hear about crime rates, if you're in my criminal justice class right now, we're discussing, crime rates in New York City. Well, back then, murder, 25 out of every million people were murdered in 1881. That's not good. Yeah, I know. But by 1898, that went up to 107. That almost quadrupled. So that's not good. How do you deal with this? Well, one way was to create more law enforcement agencies and professionalize them. They're not just volunteers. They're not just people without much training. Like, let's make this serious. Now, nativists, who are people that were against immigration, they blamed the immigrants for all of this crime that was happening at the time. All right, take from that what you will, as compared to today's political climate. All right, what about water and waste that the cities produced? Were there sewer systems? Were there plumbing systems? Well, this is all just emerging. So the question was, how can you find pure water so you're not drinking dirty water? How can you dispose of waste in a hygienic way? Because before, dumping into rivers was the main reason, the main way this would happen. And people are finally like, if you're going to dump waste into waters, this is not be the water we drink out of. This is not okay. Health officials are now realizing that it's all these microorganisms that are in the water that's causing a lot of the diseases that are killing and just making people sick. So, just for example, a river not too far from here, right where I used to teach, the Passaic River runs through Patterson, right? Industrial cities, not far from New York City, completely ruined, right? They could not use that for people, animals, irrigation at that point. At this point, cities are like, all right, we need to do something. So they started to filter water, and they also started to use chemicals to try to cleanse the water. They also began to create laws against sewage dumping. You can't just dump sewage into rivers and wherever. Once they did that, some diseases like cholera, typhoid fever, and things like that decreased. There was still a lot of tuberculosis and things. And here's a crazy fact, just to show you how industrialization and getting more products and all this stuff changed. In New York, annually, a person produced about 160 pounds of garbage, right? And that increased to about 100, excuse me, I was distracted. 160 pounds of garbage per person, 1.2 thousand pounds of ashes, right, for all the things that were burning, and also if you add the horse waste to that as well. Sorry, I don't like when I get distracted. So political machines, you may have heard of these before. Now, cities often had mayors, councils, government agencies, right? Many different people responsible for things. And sometimes there was almost too many people involved. Here's an example. In Philadelphia, there were 30 different boards for health, poverty relief, public works, etc. So lots of people trying to solve these problems, which is good, but just who and how does it really get done? There were state laws, and these state laws made it hard to give local taxes to help solve these problems. So political machines, its members tried to get into power, whether it's on one of those boards, in a city council, as a mayor, but also to obtain power. How did they do it? Well, often they used fraud, there comes your vocab word, and bribery. Like, hey, so for example, bosses would try to help people's problems. So they weren't 100% bad. A lot of problems did get fixed because of them. But maybe they're like, hey, this needs to be done. We will give your company the job. So you'll get paid from our city. But in return, you might want to fork over a little bit of money from me. All right. Public debt also increased because they were paying people sometimes a lot of good money to do this. Right. What were some examples? We mentioned civic reform. What were some examples of this? Sometimes these reformers tried to unseat machines. They saw corrupt people in power, and they wanted other people who they felt would be more honest in power. They wanted tighter control of budgets, so the cities weren't going into crazy debt. They wanted nonpartisan elections, which means where it wasn't just always like one party, just going, the same party going in all the time. They pressed for building codes, so like, that people would be able to escape from a fire or they wouldn't be too crowded. They pressed for better schools. They wanted urban improvements, so setting up parks, city centers, things you widely see in cities today, but not so much, 150 or so years ago. There were also moral reformers who wanted people's sort of values and habits to change. For example, many of them were against the sale or consumption of alcohol. We have some famous examples of this. Jane Addams and the Hull House. And if you go to Chicago, there's still lots of things named after her. You can see her museum there. There's a park for her on the Great Lake there. She helped especially women and children gain skills to get employment, but also immigrants so that they could find jobs and be able to afford housing and things like that. Florence Kelley also. So here's just some photos of the Hull House then and now. All sorts of art classes, sewing classes, learning how to use typewriters, language classes, all sorts of things would happen at this Hull House. And there were similar versions by other people run in New York City and the surrounding areas and all cities. But, all right, that's just our next one. So stop there, go back. If you haven't done your summary, please go ahead and do so. No.